Gospel according to John, the 4th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus came to a Samaritan city called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired out by his journey, was sitting by the well. It was about noon. A Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." His disciples had gone to the city to buy food. Now the Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria?" For Jews do not share things in common with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have no bucket, and the well is deep. Where do you get the living water? Are you greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us this well, and with his sons and his flocks who drank from it?" Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But those who drink of the water that I will give them will never be thirsty. The water that I will give will become in them a spring of water gushing up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water, so that I may never be thirsty or have to keep coming here to draw water." Jesus said to her, "Go, call your husband and come back." And the woman answered him, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You are right in saying, 'I have no husband,' for you have had 5 husbands, and the one you have now is not your husband. What you have said is true." The woman said to him, "Sir, I see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you say that the place where people must worship is Jerusalem." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will worship the Father, neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know. For salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming and is now here, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father seeks such as these to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth." The woman said to him, "I know that Messiah is coming, who is called the Christ. When he comes, he will proclaim all things to us." Jesus said to her, "I am he, the one who is speaking to you." The word of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Please be seated. This morning, Jesus is doing something that I wish all of us would do. He's having a conversation with someone. In this day and age, it's pretty rare, isn't it, to have a conversation with someone? I'm not talking about being on a screen. I'm not talking about email. I'm talking about actually being face-to-face with someone and speaking. And not only speaking, but more importantly, listening. To try and understand who they are, where they come from, what they've experienced, what are their hopes and their dreams, what is it that they yearn for in life. And hopefully when we get to know people on that level, they might come to get to know us. And that's exactly what Jesus is doing here. That he's sitting by a well, and we are told that it is about noon. And let's face it, it's the hottest part of the day. He's out in the area of Palestine. It gets warm there. We think in August it gets pretty warm around here. Well, it gets ramped up a little bit higher over there. And so he's sitting there and he sees this woman coming. He knows who she is. He knows all about her. I mean, he's God. He knows what she's done, where she's been, what she hasn't done. He knows. And yet he wants to have a conversation with her. Now, if you think about it,
this person would be the last person that a Jew would want to talk to. And I don't mean that to be derogatory, but if you would look at the structure that they have, if you would look at the way that they believed, if you would look just at the purity laws and everything else that they had, well, she's got so many strikes against her. First of all, she's a Samaritan. Samaritans and Jews don't get along. In fact, Samaritans actually had built their own temple because the Jews wouldn't let them come to the temple in Jerusalem to worship. So they built their own temple and worshiped God there. Of course, the Jews then said that was blasphemy, and of course they disowned them. Jesus should not have been talking to her. She is also a woman, and Jesus is not related to her. That's a big no-no. That is a social faux pas which could get people in a lot of trouble. She is also someone, as Jesus knew, that has had 5 husbands. Even in this day and age, that sounds a little excessive, doesn't it? And yet, in that day, it would have been scandalous, to say the least. Now, that doesn't mean she was a bad person, but what that means is that she's been married and divorced 5 times. Now, as we know from previous discussions, that could have been out of her hands. If her husband didn't like the way she did something, he could have just written a letter of divorce, and that was it. She had no say in that. But after 5 times, sometimes people say you got to look at the common denominator. We're not sure, we will never know. But she is no longer married. She is now living with someone who is not her husband. Again, that's a strike. That's a big strike. And yet, Jesus still talks to her. You know, it's one of those things that I love that Jesus does. He does the things he's not supposed to do. He does the things that drive everybody crazy, and yet he does everything because he has so much love for those people that he comes across. That when he sees someone, he has compassion for them. And he wants them to have a relationship with God, and so he's the one that always goes to them. That he is always the first to reach out or to speak or to be where they need him the most. And so he says to her, "Give me a drink." I know this is pretty old-fashioned, but do you remember the term around the water cooler? Yeah, that's where a lot of people socialized. A lot of people, while they were at their jobs, they would get a break and they'd all be around the water cooler, they'd get a cup of water, and that's where they talked. That's where they spent face-to-face time, and that's where they got to know one another. Well, Jesus is doing the same thing. And he's also giving us an example of how it is that we are to lead our lives. You see, the only way that we're going to be able to share Christ with others is to actually tell them. To have a conversation with them. To let them know what we know. To let them know with great humility that our lives are not perfect either. That our lives are broken. And in our brokenness, we have been made new. But how do we do that? Well, one thing is this. We need to really engage people in conversations. I'll bet you on a Sunday morning, between the 2 churches, I have no less than 12 people who will remark to me or ask me about the weather. But no one will ask me about God. We will be able to say, "Oh, the sun's shining today, and it's a great day outside." Well, it's raining again, or if we're in Erie, it's June, it's snowing. But we don't go any deeper than that, do we? You see, what God and Jesus is doing is he's actually taking that opening statement, and then he is looking at this person, and he's awaiting her response. And he is listening to her. He wants her to know that he is invested in this conversation, and most importantly, he's invested in her life. You see, that's the only way that we can do this. is that if we want people to come to know Jesus, if we want people to feel and know the love that God has for us, the only way they're going to know that is through us. And the only way they're going to know that is if we actually have a discussion, if we have a conversation, if we take time out of our lives and our busy schedules and let them know that for that time they are the most important people we will encounter. And if they feel that, and if they know that, then those discussions will be a lot more deeper than how's the weather today. That we will be able to exchange how we truly feel and get to know one another. And then after these conversations, we are then able to talk about our faith. How do we do that? Well, instead of talking about the weather, when you're talking with your friends sometime, ask them, how was your weekend? And you're going to get a lot of different replies. But most of all, after they get done and after you listen to their weekend, they might say, well, how was your weekend? Well, my weekend was absolutely wonderful. I got to spend some time with some of the greatest people that I've ever met in my life. People who love me just as I am. People who lift me up when I'm down. People who will pray for me. People who will come to me even on the street and tell me that they love me. For no other reason than because they do. I had a great weekend. Now, if you tell people that enough, they're going to start to wonder. They're going to wonder where it is that they can experience something that great. They're going to wonder where you hang out. Where is this place that you go? Who are these people? And is it really true? And the conversation gets deeper and deeper. And eventually, hopefully, with an invitation, they will come and see. Well, that's exactly what Jesus was doing there. Letting this woman, who was probably feeling lower than low, know that she mattered. She mattered not only to Jesus, but she mattered to God. And that even in her brokenness, even in the road that she traveled, there was love and grace, mercy and forgiveness that came from God. Why? Because He loves you. There's so many people in this world who are feeling lonely. They feel unloved, unwanted. They feel like no one cares. They need to know that God cares, and the only way they're going to need, or that they're going to be able to find that out, is if we first care for them. And you notice too that Jesus, no matter where He's at, no matter who He encounters, He doesn't care if they're male or female. He doesn't care if they're Jew or Greek. He doesn't care if they're Gentile. He doesn't care if they're rich or poor. He doesn't care about the status they have in society. What He cares is that there is someone that has something in common with Him. And what is that commonality? Well, number one, they're loved by God, but more importantly, they also are made in the image of God. We're related. That they are our brothers and sisters. And when we start treating people that way, they start to feel that. Pretty soon they start to treat us in the same way. And that's exactly what God wants. So I guess our challenge is to actually go out and have these conversations. To go out and get to know people. And yes, there are going to be some people who don't want to hear it. That's okay. You know, there have been people in my life that, especially when I first got into doing what I'm doing now, well, they kind of wrote me off. And yet, sometimes when you take diverging paths, you end up coming back in contact with one another. You don't judge them. You don't correct their theology. You don't tell them, I told you so. Rather, you say, hey, good to see you. I missed you. How was your weekend? Try it sometime. You just might be surprised. Trust that God will give you the words. He will give you everything you need. Because after all, God is the one who wants that relationship with that person. And He will do whatever it takes. He'll go all the way to the cross for you, just like He did for you.